rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times. Star Wars #1.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Rebel Force Radio, the weekly podcast. You're joining us after maybe you discovered us while watching the Acolyte after show. We'll talk about the Acolyte some, but this is Star Wars. Not just Acolyte, not just what's on the Disney Plus. This is everything Star Wars, your source for the Force, and so much more. Great to be with you. We have a jam-packed show this week. Coming up, we've got interview highlights from Dave Filoni and also Daisy Ridley. We're going to get, hopefully, an update on what's going on with that Rey film. Plus, of course, Acolyte. Everybody's talking about the Acolyte. We're watching each and every episode along with many of you every week, Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time for their Acolyte After Show, our breakdowns of each episodes. But we've got more Acolyte talk, plus Star Wars and pop culture and a whole lot more if we have time. That's a big if. We've had these pop cultures on the list for a long time. We're not forgetting them. Don't worry. You've been sending them at show at rebelforceradio.com. We're not going to forget you. But you know, they're evergreen. That's what's so great about Star Wars and pop culture. We can bump it. We can bump it, and it's just as impactful and meaningful the next week. So, but we'll get to them if we have time. But let's get into it right now. Joining me, as always, of course, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Glad to be back here for another week of Rebel Force Radio. You know, there's so much going on as far as the Acolyte goes, but, on this show, I think we're going to also dive into some Ahsoka talk a little bit, courtesy of some interview highlights we got coming up with Dave Filoni. And like Jason said, what's up with that Rey film? Something tells me that thing's been on kind of a bumpy road ever since it was announced. I think that thing was supposed to start shooting this summer. Well, it hasn't. So we'll get an update from Daisy Ridley, and she'll tell us what's up with that. But first, we like to sometimes take this moment at the beginning of the show to thank some Rebel Force Radio listeners who are super cool and send us stuff. Kevin and his dad have been experimenting with making 3D layered resin lamps from 2D images. And they turned the original 1977 Marvel Star Wars comic cover into one of these lamps. And they sent it to me and Jason. It's a really cool piece of artwork. And I have it right here. And as you see, it's the 1977, as you see, if you're a member of our Patreon All Access community, maybe we'll make this visual available to all our
We'll put this
listeners.
up on YouTube because we got a lot of show and tell here.
All of these art elements that went into making the Marvel Star Wars comic cover from 1977, the classic cover, we've all seen it. They've all been separated to create a cool 3D effect. So when you move it, you'll notice that Luke and Vader and Ben and even the saber and the logo, it's all a 3D effect, and it lights up. And you can see how they layered the separate images on the lucite, and then they put it all together into one big block. And this thing's kind of heavy. It'd make a great paperweight too, as well as a little decorative lamp. But I just love the vintage Marvel Star Wars comics from the 70s. They were a big part of my fandom when I was a kid. And this is a great memento from that era. And I just love it. So I wanted to show it off because I was so impressed. And I want to thank Kevin and his dad for sending it. And the great thing about it is that they make these things available to everyone. So if you visit Layered Illusions on Etsy, lairdillusions.etsy.com, you will have the opportunity to purchase one of these cool lamps for yourselves. So that's Layered Illusions, Layerd Illusions. So yeah, maybe I'll create a post and put it on the website and stuff, just so people can get tipped off to this really original piece of Star Wars art / memorabilia.
It's really cool. I'll tell you, it'd make a great nightlight. You know, if you need something Star Warsy for the kids' room, maybe your room. It lights up and casts off enough light you could certainly find your way to the bathroom without hitting your toe on the bedpost there. But I love it. I got a picture here of how it looks in my studio. It's really great.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank Kevin and his father for coming up with a really cool little bit of memorabilia. And like I said, if you're interested in getting it for yourself, check it out. lairdillusions.etsy.com. So thank you, Kevin, and Kevin's dad.
We also got another gift. I think you and I each got a different bag of coffee from Pop Culture Coffee.
I got mine. Who do you have? Because it's different pop culture franchises or trademarks to promote this coffee.
I got a Spock sucker. I got Mr. Spock. I got Vulcan Vanilla Coffee. Max got, what is that, Puff Mellow?
Puff Mellow.
Puff Mellow.
It's Ghostbusters coffee. You know, the Mr. Stay Puffed character is well represented on the bag. These bags are collectible. The coffee is delicious. Puffed Mellow is vanilla marshmallow.
Oh, and that sounds great.
Yeah, really good stuff. These are the beans. You got to have the beans. And we got the beans right here. And so Kyle Newman sent these to us. This is part of a thing that he's involved with right now called Pop Culture Coffee. To see their brands and see the franchises that are attached to their coffees, you can go to popculturecoffee.com. And the whole story about who they are and what makes their coffee special is all there. Kyle is part of a team, including Star Wars legend Dan Madsen, from the guy who basically created Star Wars Celebration, the guy who created the Star Wars Fan Club and Star Wars Insider Magazine, Dan Madsen, recognized experts in the worlds of fandom. He's also attached to this project. popculturecoffee.com. They have Ghostbusters, Star Trek, Teenage Mutant Turtles, and I believe more franchises will be jumping on.
That's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Imagine
what
if
did
you
I
were
call
just, well, you left out the ninja part. You know, I know what that was after your time. I know that, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You never got into Turtles. I know that's something that
I have no knowledge.
You're like in college when Ninja Turtles were on.
Right. I was listening to, the Turtles, like the band, the Turtles. Flo and Eddie, Happy Together, Ring Any Bells. Yeah, certainly not the Mutant Ninja Turtles. They weren't really on my radar, I have to admit. And still to this day, I have no interaction.
To this day, he says.
Ninja Turtles. Yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. TMNT.
Yeah.
Not even on my radar. So I'm sorry. I think they're a lot of fun, though. I like the whole cowabunga business and all of that. And to eat pizza. I love all of that. But that's really
something that is on your radar, though, and that's action figures, right?
I love
action figures. So we got a care package, and there's one of each of everything for me and for you. So I will get this off to you. We got a care package from our friends over at Kessel Run Heron Collectibles.
Oh, I love those guys.
It's the only Star Wars themed hair salon barbershop that also sells action figures. And
I know. We need to franchise this business because I need one of these in the Chicago area.
They're in Australia, in Adelaide, Australia. And these are a bunch of massive Star Wars fans that happen to be barbers, hairdressers. I don't know what the right term is. Stylists.
I think stylists.
Yes. That's a very general term. I like that. Hairstylists.
Yeah.
But they're also crazy obsessed with Star Wars. They actually play Rebel Force Radio in the salon, in the shop. So people are in there getting their hair cut, getting a shave, getting whatever, and they're hearing Rebel Force Radio, which is awesome. So, hey, maybe right now you're sitting in Kessel Run Collectibles.
Wow. Imagine
hair and collectibles.
listening to RFR while you're getting your hair cut. Hey, look who's there watching you get your hair cut.
Oh, yeah, sure, it's Liam Neeson, Hey, take a little off the top,
All right.
So they're crazy, obsessed with Star Wars and action figures and all that. So they started making, through 3D printing technology, action figure props and stands. And I'll show you. So the first thing I got here, and these are just things that you can throw in to your display and just add a little life to it. So, like, for example, right here, these are like little crates. They're like little cube crates that you could paint any color that you want and just toss in, whether it be the 6-inch Black Series or the 3 3/4-inch figures. So this is like their little their crate version. Actually, we could call this line Crate and Barrel, because the other are these like little canisters that you could have. You could think about if you backed the Mos Eisley Cantina, you could have these things just hanging out in the cantina. You could paint them all different types of colors. You could also, throw them in, if you've got a Yato's Junk Shop diorama, that'd be a nice diorama. Anyway, so you get some of those. And again, these are just little things to populate your action figure world. But I think this is really the coolest part. They have action figure stands. Anybody who collects action figures knows you can never have enough stands. But it's not just any stand. They took a year to develop this stand. So let me just show you. Got some photos here. I want to show you what they got going on. So check this out. I've got my vintage Han Solo Bespin Fatigues action figure here. And of course, they've got various sized pegs. Each of the stands comes with 3 different sized pegs. So they don't know. Maybe you're into vintage Star Wars. Maybe you're into G.I. Joe, so that's really smart. But here's the coolest part. If you'll notice by this Han Solo, there's this little bar. And the bar actually comes embedded into, let's see if I can show this, into the stand. It pops out, and what that then allows you to do is you can use it, especially if you're a collector of vintage G.I. Joe, because they're made with a much more brittle plastic. And if you take a vintage Joe and you stick him on a peg that's too big, too girthy, if you will, you might bust the foot of that figure. So what you can do in this case, and I do it right here with my vintage Luke Skywalker, you can actually put the feet underneath the bar, so you don't have to worry about busting a foot with a peg that's not the right size.
Oh,
so
that's nice. And some really figures don't even have the peg hole.
Right.
Some figures, they put that nowadays, so they can protect their articulated ankles, they put the peg hole on the toe underneath the foot.
Oh, I hate that.
Because you know why? Because it's merely cosmetic. It's a non-functioning peg hole. Right. You can see it. You can see it right underneath that foot, but try putting it on top of a peg. This frustrates me as a collector when Hasbro does stupid things like this, where they don't acknowledge the integrity of Star Wars action figures, and they create figures, 3 3/4-inch figures, that don't have those peg holes. That to me was always the most revolutionary thing about Star Wars action figures. No toys had anything that would help you assist them with standing up and displaying them, but the Star Wars action figures all had the little pegs underneath, the little peg holes underneath the feet, so you could put them on peg stands or whatever and have them stand upright. Oddly enough, after all these years, Kenner and then Hasbro, they've never really manufactured stands that you can purchase. They did some. They experimented with some, like the old Comtech chip. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
The Comtech chip, that has the peg, as you can see on there, to put the figure on. But and then they had some other stands, but they never manufactured like an assortment of stands you could purchase.
There was.
They were only
I got to
like
correct you. There was a period of time when they did do this, and this is
Those
when
gray
I think
things,
it was the Saga
were those available
collection.
separately?
Yeah, so
yeah.
what you could do is if you bought a Saga, I believe it was the Saga collection, it would come with a stand. But then they did offer a box of additional stands that you could get.
Yes.
And they would give you like 3 or 4 from Return of the Jedi, 3 or 4 with the Empire logo, 3 or 4 with the A New Hope logo. They did, but it did not last long at all. And I loved those stands. They were great because you could put your character on a stand that was, had the logo of the movie. And they were the classic logos too, pre-Disney logos. But you're right. Jim, not only have they never produced stands at any great volume, they've also never really given us a definitive price guide, or not price guide, but a
checklist.
Checklist. Yeah, checklist. Yeah, something like that. In fact, I mean, we've known guys, including the guys over at Blue Milk, that put together this incredible vintage collection book, coffee table book that chronicles at the time all of the postmodern vintage collection figures. And the folks at Hasbro don't even know exactly how many figures and what figures they made. It's really astonishing. So anyway, but huge thanks to the guys at Kessel Run Hair and Collectibles. And Jim, these are on their way to you.
Oh,
you get
great.
a bag of each.
Stands, barrels, and crates. Can't wait. Excellent. Yeah, it's funny, though. Hasbro has no idea how many action figures they've actually produced over the years. When they released a Boba Fett figure a couple decades ago, they said, this is the 300th action figure. And it didn't take collectors very long with any sort of just like casual sleuthing to be able to do the math and realize that Hasbro was way off even with that.
Yeah.
And since then, maybe that number has quadrupled. So I would love to hear a definitive count on how many individual separate action figures have been produced for Star Wars in the 3 3/4 inch range.
All right. Well, I'll tell you this.
Unique
let me ask
individual
you,
ones. Yeah.
What do you define as unique?
Well, that's another thing, too, because the technology has changed. So they've re-released action figures with more realistic face sculpts. And so I would consider anything that is a variation of a purposeful variation, too, not like a factory defect or something, but a purposeful variation of an action figure or a unique action figure that was packaged and marketed individually, or as a pack-in, or as a multi-pack.
A lot of great figures.
All of those apply.
The deluxe.
I'm talking about the actual figure itself. I'm not talking about packaging.
Right.
I'm not talking about anything like that. And I don't think anyone's really come up with a definitive number, even all of these years later. And now it's much more complicated because people are 3D printing action figures. Fans are making action figures that are on par, if not of a higher quality, than what the actual licensees are putting out these days. So it's really difficult. All I know is that I got about 4,000 of them. So I hope they never come alive, because they will have a revolution and they will take over this whole house if they should somehow gain the ability to think and therefore I am. This guy's been putting us on a shelf for all of these years, keeping us locked down here in the basement. Let's revolt.
Imagine if they went all Toy Story on you.
It'd be like
marching around.
Gulliver.
Gulliver's Travels.
Gulliver's Travels.
Jimmy Mac wakes up tied down to his bed.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, not my bed. They would like drag me out to the front yard and make an example out of me. Is what they would do. I know what these figures are thinking. Don't look at me that way. Chiari Mundi concept art action figure.
All right,
which you see still in my studio,
Couple
after
more
the
thank
after
yous here
show.
real quick. This thank you to Pat Gomez. He sent me this very cool LED light up Star Wars logo. It's the classic Star Wars lock-up logo and LED. He just said, hey, this gift is a symbolic reminder of how you and Jimmy provide illuminating conversations. Thank you for everything you do. My wife and I love listening to you guys, especially during breakfast. I've been a Patreon member since day one and a longtime listener since the Forcecast days and will continue to do so until you both retire. So this is from Pat Gomez, and then he included a couple of photos here. Here he is cosplaying as Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's a nice
That's cool.
nice set
He's
of
in a
robes
cool
he's
room,
got
man.
there.
Nice
He
robes.
says,
I like the...
my fanaticism follows me wherever I go, all the way to my classroom where my students roll their eyes at me but quietly approve. So he's
nice.
Maybe wearing the Obi-Wan robes to class. And then here's a photo of he and his wife. He's got some Spanish on here, and I'm terrible at Spanish. I'm just going to show the photo of Pat and his lovely wife, and they're big RFR fans, and they sent me that great thing that's now adorning the palatial studios. But I got to tell you, Jim, these studios are not that palatial because I share space with my two cats' litter box. It's right over here as I'm pointing. And I don't know what it is about the sound of my voice when we're doing Rebel Force Radio, or they know when we're recording the podcast because they always do their business right before we're ready to go. And I'm stuck, and I'm complaining about it constantly. Well, Father's Day was last weekend, and my kids and my wife decided to get me something really cool here. These are called Sensies, and they're about 8-9 inches tall, and you plug them in, and they warm up, and you put these little tarts, these little wax elements, these little wax pieces. You put them at the top, and they melt, and they make the studio smell great. And I've got a stormtrooper
It's kind of like an
here.
incense.
Yeah,
Kind of like an incense sort of thing. Yeah.
Right. So I got a stormtrooper one and a Boba Fett. And these are great. And I got these things cranking right now, and I don't smell any cat poop, let me tell you. But I also got a 3-pack of the scent. So right now, I've got Tatooine Sunset. That's what is, if you sniff.
It smells good, yeah.
Yeah, I've got Tatooine Sunset, and this is more like your, smells like something's baking. You got some cinnamon, some brown sugar in there. It's very foodie.
That's
And then
what I
I've
imagine
got
Tatooine smells like, Smells like, pumpkin spice or whatever.
right. And then I got a Hoth Winter, which that's like your sort of fresh linen smell, right?
Oh, yeah.
Fresh laundry. And then lastly, I've got Endor Forest, and that's your pine smell.
Pine, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like Dad's
Smells a
station
lot like
wagon back in the 70s.
It smells a lot like Christmas around here.
But anyway, I did want to thank the kids and the wife for doing that for me because I've been complaining about these damn cats and stinking up the damn studio.
Gotta get you a Sarlacc pit litter box.
Kids, don't play with your action figure.
Little play.
All right, let's check in on the voicemail.
You must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message?
Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Hey, Jason and Jimmy. This is Ian from Wisconsin. I found you guys back in 2020 while I was doing some delivery driving during the pandemic. But I was recently listening to your after show on the Acolyte 3rd episode, Destiny. And there was just one interesting point. I was hoping it would come up in the after show that didn't, but I thought I'd drop a thought. So right when Soul gets Osha and has her on the ship after everything's burned down, one thing I was really struck by is at that point, if you look in the background, you do see that the young Torben, I don't remember what his name is, but you see he has the scar there, and I thought that was really telling, or maybe a little more condemning, makes it a little more complex. If you look at the back of that shot, just seeing he wasn't scarred before, and he gained that scar in whatever happened there in the witch's place. So yeah, just wanted to drop that thought. All right, take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Huh. I don't think I picked up on that. So we're seeing young Torben with the scar.
Yeah.
We've seen old Torben.
It was in
with
the background.
Scar.
It was in the background. I've seen some people isolate this in our Facebook group and on Patreon and everything. And it's hard to make out because it's so blurry. But it certainly does look like he sustained those injuries that we see. He, the scratches on his face, the blind eye and everything. He sustained those during the events on Brendock and with the Witch's Coven. Did we notice that was Kalnaka aboard that ship? Did anybody see him in the background? I certainly did not. Kalnaka to me, he's growing into the major mystery right now. Because why did he separate from the Jedi Order and resisted any sort of communications for a year while he was out on this planet? True, the Jedi sent him there for some reason. We still don't understand.
He was stationed.
Maybe they sent him away, like the Corleones did after Michael killed the police captain in Salazzo in that restaurant. You know, Michael had to go away to Italy for a while. Maybe the Jedi were sending Kalnaka someplace, or maybe Kalnaka was being punished. Did Kalnaka somehow fall under a witch's spell and attack his own Jedi? Was he in league with the witches?
Well, there is a deleted scene, or a scene that we haven't seen, I should say, of Kalnaka coming after Torben with a lightsaber, jumping off.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and so that might be what results in the injury on Torben. It could be he suffered that at the hands of Kalnaka, and those two have some big fight, some big battle, even though they might be under the influence of the witches, but those scars, literal, figurative, physical scars and mental scars, maybe have a hard time healing for both of them.
Yeah. So we'll definitely be getting more flashbacks, one or two, maybe more, from a different perspective. And hopefully we could do without the song and dance routine and all of that stuff the witches were up to. Or like kid actors, forget about it.
When you see those one of those shows or one of those movies where they give you multiple flashbacks from different points of view, and you're going to have to endure some of the same scenes over and over. Yeah. I don't know about the old. The one thing I went back and I've rewatched each one of these episodes. At least I've rewatched each one at least one time because my wife is also watching the show, and a lot of times we don't get to it. She doesn't get to it until the weekend. And during that scene in episode 3, there's a witch like cackling. As if I'm watching like a Looney Tunes cartoon where it's Bugs Bunny and the witch. Yeah. I thought
it's in a real. There was something about it. At first, I was like, "Oh, that's kind of atmospheric and stuff." And then when I watched it the second time. When I watched the second time, I was like, man, that witch is laughing at like a really inappropriate moment because Mother Anastasia is laying down this real spiritual rap on them, and then this one's just chuckling up a storm in the front row. I'd be like, hey, wait a second. Why don't you take that down a notch? But I really think with the show, they're leaning into a lot of like witchy tropes. The cackling witch. I'm surprised
Jim,
some of them don't have like a wart on their nose or something.
Remember Mandalorian where we heard the pirates singing "Arr"?
Oh yeah,
avast, arr!
Yeah, right. I gotta find me gold. Whatever. You look there, and there's a weequay with a parrot on his shoulder and stuff. It's like, wait, what?
Well, maybe
the hell is going on?
Monkey lizard, at least. But yeah, it's a little too. George was just really good, and his whole creative team back then. We always give George a lot of credit, but we can't, forget. Obviously, people like Ralph McQuarrie and Roger Christian and all these who populated the world according to George's mind, and they were very good at being at evoking certain things that resonated with us, through mythology, etc., without being really literal about it. Like Han was a space pirate, but he didn't go around saying "arg," and he didn't have a patch. He was more like a gunslinger than he was. They called him a pirate, but he was more, I think, more visually like a gunslinger.
Cowboy, yeah. But I just like to look at some of this stuff and try to determine where they're finding the inspiration from. When the witches mentioned that they were being hunted, I immediately thought back to the Salem witch trials of the late 1600s and all the crazy stuff that went down in Massachusetts with people hunting down witches and putting them on trial. And let's my favorite is let's see if she's a witch. If she's not a witch, she'll float. If she is a witch, she'll sink to the bottom of this tub of water we have here. And of course, everyone sunk to the bottom,
Right.
It's like nobody's going to float, not even a witch. So I think they're kind of tapping into sometimes maybe some real history or just some of those tropes that we've always known about witches, short of flying around on brooms.
Oh, wait.
Maybe.
Just wait.
I know we're not there yet. We still have at least one more flash.
We're not out of the what was the name of that planet that Kelnaka was on?
Kofar.
We're not out of the Kofar woods yet when it comes to some of the things we're going to see here.
No, we're not far. We're not far from Kofar at all. So and I got to admit, I've been having fun with the show. Just I look forward to it every week. I love the picking apart the lore and the mythology and everything that's being presented. Is the Acolyte my favorite Star Wars? No. And it never will be. And I see a lot of the things that make a lot of people upset online. I see the things that are kind of cringeworthy and stuff. But I'm just trying to maintain a focus. And Jason, you've been a great partner along the way through all of this, where we just are really trying to stay hyper-focused on the story itself because we want these podcasts to live on. And for people who actually are interested in it, interested in the story, interested in the lore, we want this podcast to be a companion to their viewing. So, 5 years down the road, maybe everything that makes people upset will be swept under the carpet by then, and it'll just be a signpost of the times. But somebody might want to listen to the show and actually hear some honest analysis and breakdown of what's going on without inserting outside elements like personal feelings about the showrunner or Lucasfilm, or personal feelings about where you stand in whatever cultural war you're fighting and things like that. I understand what's going on around everyone. But, some fans approach it a vastly different way than the way we do.
Yeah.
And they do it on other Star Wars podcasts even. And it's not often that me and Jason will promote another Star Wars podcast because we think there's only one Star Wars podcast, and that's Rebel Force Radio. But friend of ours, New Jersey Radio Pro, and friend of RFR, Eastside Dave McDonald. He is so funny. He's such a great radio personality, and he doesn't hold back. He loves Star Wars. He's not a hater. He doesn't fight on the cultural war battlefields, and he doesn't get all wound up about politics, but he does really care about Star Wars and has been a fan forever. And he hosts a show called Yaddle Chattel because he loves Yaddle. He loves Yaddle. And Eastside Dave has been around the RFR community for years and years and years, and we just love him. And he always promotes Rebel Force Radio, so we want to do him a solid and let you listen to a few highlights of Eastside Dave reviewing The Acolyte. And let's just say Eastside isn't taking the way the storytelling is unfurling. He's not taking it very well. It's really interesting to listen to because I get the feeling that Eastside Dave is going through some primal scream therapy here where he has to, really get it off his chest. And once he does, I think he feels a lot better. And so I recommend anybody, if you're feeling upset about The Acolyte or something, don't go out and, hide behind phony internet names, screen names, and type stuff on Twitter and review bomb or whatever you do. Just grab a microphone and yell and scream into it as loud as you can. But you have to put sentences together. And you have to have you have to be going somewhere. You have to have a point. And Eastside Dave does in his latest episode. I listened to it on Saturday. I was sitting on my front porch just pissing myself laughing at this meltdown he has. So we're not going to react to The Acolyte quite the way Eastside Dave does, but maybe we can live through him a little vicariously and check out some of his rants. So I recommend everybody do so. Go to eastsidedavecountry.com and check out Yaddle Chattel. Here's a few highlights for you. This is like listening to a pro wrestler break down an episode of The Acolyte. Like, you almost think that, like, Mean Gene Okerlund is going to start talking at one point. But no, it's just Eastside Dave. And here's our first highlight of his show. He's given us his take on the witches and the thread. Take it away, Eastside.
Didn't we just see witches in the Ahsoka series? And by the way, weren't the witches in the Ahsoka series about 1,000 times cooler than these f***ing hacks? We just saw witches! We just saw them! Witches in Ahsoka weren't talking about the Force, calling it the thread? The thread? The f*** is a thread? The Jedi might refer to it as the Force, but here, in our coven, we know it to be the thread. You!
He's completely having a meltdown. Now, listen, guys. I'm just playing this for entertainment purposes only. I know some people get bent out of shape when people say bad things about Star Wars, but I mean, there's just been so much. It's been like a tidal wave of criticism hitting The Acolyte. And for some reason, I find Eastside Dave's take to be not only completely genuine,
yeah,
but really funny as well. I mean, like Roddy Piper level. Like if Piper was reviewing Star Wars, he would be.
Yeah,
Eastside
that's exactly what this is. Yeah, he's doing a wrestling promo about The Acolyte.
But that's Eastside Dave. He's no stranger to the ring. Believe me. Eastside Dave has wrestling. Oh yeah. This is legit. So he gets very concerned about the direction in which the franchise is heading, and believes that maybe Disney and Lucasfilm don't really know what they're doing.
This is fucking Star Wars, stupid. Hey, Kathleen Kennedy, get your fucking head out of your ass. Get the biggest and best directors, writers, actors. Jon Favreau, Tony Gilroy, that type of shit. None of these fucking newbies, I'm sorry, or people who have not made their bones yet in Hollywood. Them. This ain't a fucking college movie. This ain't some sort of Andy Warhol experimental film. Give it out because what? Someone made a good documentary 4 years ago? What does the have to do with Star Wars? They have hired too many people who don't know Star Wars, and it's showing now. Who the are these people?
Sometimes Eastside says the things that we all wish we could say, but you gotta give this to him. And you're so right earlier when you said, like, this isn't run of the mill YouTube style, hate Kathleen Kennedy, hate everything Disney.
He's not like that. He's not a
no,
hater.
not at all. I listened to the whole thing. Eastside has watched every episode of every show that's come out, and he's got some good points here. It's hard to argue. Yeah, the Dathomir witches in Clone Wars and the Dathomir witches that we see in Ahsoka are much cooler than the witches we see in the Acolyte. They're much more Star Warsy, we'll say, than these. These are a much more literal kind of translation. So yeah, he's definitely got a good point. A good point now, there. When he talks about the quality of the people that they're bringing up, we've talked about this a lot, Jim. It seems like, somebody just becomes sort of the flavor of the moment, and it's like, we're going to book them for a Star Wars. We're going to get them they got to give them their own show or their own movie just because they're hot in the moment.
Yeah. Why don't they earn their place? We thought that the streaming series would have been a breeding ground for future feature film directors like Deborah Chow, Bryce Dallas Howard, Rick Famuyiwa. I mean, there's just been so many directors rolling through, and some of them already have silver screen experience, but in Star Wars, no. Yeah, we're just left scratching our head when somebody like Charmin Obaid-Chinoy gets announced as director of the Rey film. It's like, she's never even directed a movie before. So it's shocking that they give
even going back to Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson had no pedigree in blockbuster entertainment.
Definitely not.
Entertainment.
No.
Look how that turned out.
So you say to yourself, he's picking on Kathleen Kennedy and just proving Kathy's point that women can't keep their head above water in Star Wars because of the male-dominated audience. Well, okay, that's fine. You want to think that, but Eastside Dave doesn't just pick on his targets based on gender. Look out, Bob Iger. You're now in Eastside Dave's crosshairs.
Bob Iger, sit your fucking ass down and watch every second of The Acolyte. I fucking guarantee it that Bob Iger will fucking despise it. Bob Iger, get your stupid fucking ass off your couch and watch this shit. If you do, I bet you're making a phone call to Kathleen Kennedy. And I bet you it's going to sound like, you're fired. Hey, Bob. Wake up!
Even if you don't agree with him, you have to find this funny. You have to find it funny. I don't care who you are, it's funny.
The whole rant just goes through all of these stages and evolution and stuff until Eastside Dave actually gets exhausted from it all.
I like when you start hearing his voice giving out.
Oh, my God. I mean, you could hear he's spent toward the end.
Oh.
But, I mean, everybody's, he's so one-dimensional. He's just yelling and screaming at a mic. That's not true. He's funny as hell, and he actually has interesting theories that he drops throughout the podcast, especially toward the end, when he lays on us his theory about the dark side master and who that could possibly be.
You want my fucking theory? Here it is. Saul's behind all this shit. Saul is playing Osha and May. Saul told Osha May's dead, but Saul might actually be the Sith with the red lightsaber, and the whole time while Saul was over here telling Osha May's dead, Saul would visit May and tell May Osha's dead. And the reason why is because Saul feels light side force in Osha, keep her away from May, I'll bring her to the temple, but the entire time, Saul's a double agent. He's in the temple, he's able to then isolate Osha there, keep her at May, and then let May do her thing, and he visits May sometimes and gives her instructions. He's telling May, you have to get revenge for your sister who's dead. He told them both that they're dead, and he's working both sides. At the end of the day, Saul's a bad guy. There you go, I just fucking solved the whole mystery. That's what's gonna happen.
Okay, Dave's not the only one that's throwing shade at Saul and putting him on the list as possible suspects for being the red lightsaber Sith. But we know now after the last episode it's impossible. They're in the same place at the same time. But it
sure seems that way, yeah.
Right. It doesn't absolve Saul from being the master of this individual with the red lightsaber. I mean, because I really believe that the character with the lightsaber is not the master. I think we're looking at the apprentice there, which would then put May as the acolyte under the apprentice. So, but I really want to believe that this is Darth Tenebris at the top of this. I really want to. And I'm not I'm not a slave to canon, but this one's too important. It's right there in Revenge of the Sith. We get the Plagueis, and I know Tenebris is probably, I don't know if Tenebris is new canon.
Expanded universe.
What did I say?
Well, no, you're right. He might not have transferred into new canon. He hasn't been legitimized in new canon.
Right.
He's
Tenebris
Legends
hasn't.
now.
Yeah.
Because Tenebris is only talked about in the Darth Plagueis novel, which should be deemed canon. It really should be. It's so good. And James Luceno spent years developing that story. And it's right there in front of him. Use it. Use it, but no, I'm not going to get all crazy like Eastside. I love Eastside. So if you're interested in hearing more from him, EastsideDaveCountry.com, or look it up on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get podcasts. Yaddle Chattel. It's hilarious.
That's great.
And people are saying, oh, well, he's just like the rest of the fan base. He's totally overreacting. He thinks that everything is going to be different now because of the Acolyte, and Star Wars will never be the way it used to be. Well, he might be onto something, and I'll tell you why. Because we've heard from some of our spies who are within the Lucasfilm realm. Lucasfilm is actively moving forward with retconning certain lore from the original trilogy to fit the new lore that's being revealed in the Acolyte. Lucasfilm has actually even gone as far as making edits in classic Star Wars films like The Empire Strikes Back. And they're making these edits so that film will be consistent with the lore being presented in the Acolyte. And so we have a spy who works within Lucasfilm, and this person has leaked footage to us for proof. To prove that this is actually happening. And maybe guys like Eastside Dave aren't overreacting at all. Listen to this clip from The Empire Strikes Back, very special edition, and this will prove my point.
Luke, you do not yet realize your importance. You have only begun to discover your power. Join me, and I will complete your training. I'll never join you!
If you only knew the power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
See? No!
So is the fan base overreacting? I don't know. We'll let you decide.
Half a million voices reached out in terror and was silenced. I feel something terrible has happened. Oh, my God. Yeah, I think, you know what? After seeing that, I think Eastside is underreacting. That's what
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
Oh, my God.
So, I mean, you can't change the past, apparently. So.
Oh, man.
So be looking out for that on TBS and TNT next time Empire Strikes Back is screening, and you'll notice some differences, I'm sure.
All right. Well, you know, you might not be getting 2 episodes of Rebel Force Radio every week throughout the summer. We're going to be kind of mixing up the schedule a little bit. We'll tell you about that in a moment. But what you can always count on is more Rebel Force Radio over on Patreon.
Oh, yeah. I mean, patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio is where Star Wars fans and the RFR community, that's where they consider their headquarters to be located. That's patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. There's all kind of great stuff. I almost once again dropped into Eastside Dave territory. There's all kind of great stuff stuff happening at patreon.com/RebelForceRadio, and you can support our podcast by joining the community. And every week we release unique podcasts that are exclusive to Patreon, shows like RFR Q&A, the Babu Freaks, of course, and RFR RPG. RFR on Patreon is the only place to get ad-free episodes of Rebel Force Radio, and the only place to see complete full show video, complete episodes you can watch. Sometimes we release highlights on YouTube, but that's nothing like the full 2-hour, sometimes plus videos that we release on Patreon, where you can see everything that happens in the show from the moment we say hello to the moment we say goodbye. This week we released a great episode of RFR Q&A. RFR Q&A number 207, The Psychology of Fandom. It's a great conversation I have with RFR VIP Jeremy Lanning. And Jeremy is a licensed psychotherapist, and he joins me on the Q&A to share his professional take on fandom reactions to things like The Acolyte, along with examples from his experience as a therapist. We discuss The Acolyte, The Bad Batch, and really go deep into what the relationship is like between fans and the franchise itself. It's great. We take a quiz. We take a fandom quiz that determines what kind of fan we are. And we made
getting very scientific here.
Yeah, right. It's a survey. Yeah, we make it available to our listeners, Patreon supporters who want to take the survey themselves and see how they rank as far as their fandom goes. It's very fun. It's a really great discussion. It's one of those things where it's like we didn't discuss really what we were going to talk about at all before the show happened, and it just flowed, and we had this really great conversation. So this is the type of stuff that happens every week at patreon.com/RebelForceRadio. Full show video, ad-free shows, great community stuff. I put a picture of me dressed up as Batman in 1989, smoking a smoke and having a beer. Well, I'm dressed head to toe as
for Batman Day.
So join us, patreon.com/RebelForceRadio. Hang out with a great community of Star Wars fans. Get a bunch of bonus content and that you can't get anywhere else, along with hangouts and just good vibes. Great Star Wars community, and it's just growing by leaps and bounds. So even if you don't understand what I'm talking about, go to patreon.com/RebelForceRadio and poke around a little bit, and you might see something there you like. So thank you to all of our supporters, and thank you, Patreon, for providing us with an outlet for real community interaction, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, as I said earlier, we're going to have a little bit of a different schedule over the course of the summer. It's summertime. Jimmy's got kids. I've got kids. There's things that we want to be doing. We don't want to necessarily be locked in the studio all week long. So a couple of things. So there's not going to be a weekly RFR for a couple of weeks. We're going to continue every week doing the Acolyte after shows. Those are Wednesday nights, 8:00 p.m. Eastern on the RFR YouTube channel. The weekly Rebel Force Radio will come back on July 14th, and then we're going to go every other week for the month of July. I've got a vacation coming up. We've got the 4th of July coming up. So all kinds of things, but we will be here for the Acolytes. Don't worry about that, and then we will fill in some of the gaps with weekly RFR podcasts. But if that's not enough, as we just said, Rebel Force Radio on Patreon has a lot of content, so you can definitely fill your boots with that.
That's right.
All right.
That's
well,
right.
let's check in on the headlines, see what's happening this week in Star Wars.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news.
Come closer, I have good news.
Well, we talked a little bit last week about how Dave Filoni and crew are making their rounds, trying to drum up support within the industry for the Ahsoka series as it gets considered for Emmy nominations and various awards. It's going to be award season before you know it. This is the time of year where they do their campaigning. And so Dave Filoni is out there promoting it, talking about it in retrospect, and hopefully giving us maybe a little bit of information about what's ahead for him in Star Wars. So, Jim, what do we got here?
So, yeah, he's been popping around to a lot of like industry outlets. And one of them is a show called Third and Fairfax, the WGAW podcast Writers Guild of America West. I was a little confused on where that second W was coming from, WGAW, because I know the Writers Guild of America is the WGA, but this is WGAW. So, West Coasters all sticking together, Filoni showing up on their show, and he appeared to discuss Ahsoka. Like I said, they're doing a real promotional push to have the Ahsoka show be considered for awards. Award season will be coming up, things like Emmys and Golden Globes, what have you. So Filoni's out there continuing to conduct interviews to promote Ahsoka for this awards consideration. And he's with the WGAW podcast. And so they lean a little bit on the writing, a little bit more, which is a big interest for me. If we're talking about Dave Filoni as a filmmaker and storyteller, let's talk about the writing. And he talks a little bit on this show about how he goes about making Star Wars that feels like Star Wars, creating stories that work within this galaxy.
The difference now is that we don't have George, of course. He's not part of it at this point. And, I think we would all acknowledge that, who actually knows what to do and where to go. Well, it's more of a collective group that we discuss. My attitude about it now is if you really want to know what makes Star Wars work, you watch what George made. And I'd throw THX and American Graffiti in there for sure. If you want to be educated on Star Wars and understand how, if you want to study and make a Hitchcock film, you'd study Hitchcock. So you should study George Lucas if you want to make a Star Wars film. There's a way that it's not just the way he writes it, it's the way that in the end that they learn to edit it, the way he composes it, the way he sees that universe, especially visually, is very important. So for me, especially writing, the visual component of Star Wars is on the page. It is imagined visually as well as you're writing it.
Well, it sounds so great to hear him talking about that because I would expect him to say something like, well, if you want to learn how to write Star Wars, make Star Wars that works, you got to look at Kurosawa. You got to go and look at the Westerns. You got to, because there was a period of time where they were so caught up in the alchemy of Star Wars that sometimes I felt like, Jim, during Clone Wars and Rebels and stuff, they were making episodes that were reminiscent of some of the elements that helped formulate what Star Wars was to George, but not Star Wars. We would say, oh, this episode of Rebels or Clone Wars is inspired by Hitchcock. How about making an episode that's inspired by Star Wars? We would say that frequently. So to hear Dave now say, look, if you want to be able to write Star Wars, if you want to make Star Wars that works, you got to look at what George did. You got to look at George Lucas. George Lucas is Star Wars, maybe THX, American Graffiti, and that sort of thing. So I love that we're now talking about George as being sort of the, he's the influence. He's the only influence you need, really, when it comes to Star Wars.
He's like the North Star. Everybody's looking at him and what he created. I like that Dave throws in THX 1138 and American Graffiti. Because those were very important stepping stones for George to cross to make him the complete filmmaker and the guy who would be capable to tell the story of Star Wars in the way that he did. I hear you, Jason. So many times people consider themselves expert level George Lucas devotees because they spout out things like, well, A New Hope is basically a remake of The Hidden Fortress from Kurosawa.
Right.
I've watched Hidden Fortress a number of times. I have the Criterion edition. And there are elements you can pluck out of it and say, oh, I see how that inspired the droids. I see how that inspired the Empire. But it's far from being a shot-by-shot remake of a Hidden Fortress.
It's so overblown. It's more overblown than Vader's red eyes.
It's very overblown. And then the other thing is, like, current creatives who work within Star Wars these days will say nonsensical stuff to try to legitimize things that happen in their productions of Star Wars to kind of make it match up with George Lucas's vision. And the one example I'm thinking of, and I'm going to talk about Fennec Shan actress Ming-Na Wen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I love her. God, I love her. I think she's just absolutely wonderful. But I'll never forget the interview I saw of her where she was trying to justify the appearance of the mods on the Vespas in the Book of Boba Fett. And she said, well, you have to understand that George Lucas was very influenced by mod culture. And I'll be damned if I could ever find a single reference of George talking about mod culture. I think she was confused with the fact that he's somebody who's steeped in hot rod culture.
Yes.
And somebody who likes racing and working on cars.
Cruising.
And driving fast. And, of course, cruising when you think of American Graffiti. But the mod thing was a British thing that really had, I think, very little influence on George Lucas, you know?
Yeah.
If you were talking about, like, I don't know, The Who or somebody, you know,
Right.
like Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey. But, I mean, even there, it's just, those are it's apples to oranges. And I just looked at that saying, wow, is this what's going to be happening now with Star Wars without George Lucas? They're going to constantly be making connections between George and some influence that never existed.
Yeah, they're retconning his influences.
Right.
Right.
This could be some really difficult terrain to map our way through if that's going to be happening. So we really have to rely on ourselves to be knowledgeable about the things that George has said and the things that George has done. And there's a lot of great books out there. The Paul Duncan Star Wars books, exhaustive interviews with George Lucas. Those were all done after he sold the company. There are several biographies about George. Some of them can be a little sketchy, but there's also a great book you gave me years ago, Jason. It was a compilation of all of these interviews that George had done with news media and magazines and things like that. It's just a real great look at the guy's entire career and what was going on in his head. And never once did he mention mod culture. I'll tell you that right now.
Right.
So we just have to be a little protective of the history of Star Wars and make sure that ill-informed people are not rewriting that actual history.
Yeah, I kind of hope that maybe George's museum will go a long way to preserve some of the truth when it comes to his legacy and his influences and all that.
Good call. Good call. And I think Dave Filoni's a good steward for Star Wars who will do his best to maintain the integrity of the things that he learned from George. And Dave continues to talk about working within the minefield of Star Wars canon, making sure he doesn't trip any of the mines, and collaborating with some new voices in Star Wars and bringing in new elements to Star Wars.
I think there's ample room. There's unlimited room for new in Star Wars. I don't think that we have really begun to, discover what that exactly is as new generations of kids that grew up with Clone Wars, that grew up with the sequels, come to us and say, this is what I like about Star Wars. So, it's interesting to, again, always hear a pitch from somebody and hear what they have to say and what is it that they like about Star Wars. It turns out we like a lot of the same stuff, by the way, which that's a good thing and a bad thing, because then we all tell similar stories. So you gotta be careful of that. But yeah, canonicity, the short of it for me is when people like the story, it seems to be canon. When they don't, it doesn't seem very much to become canon. That's true when we were dealing with the old expanded universe. You'd have fans fighting for some, stories, not other stories. The only canonical thing back then was if George Lucas did it.
Right.
It was very cut and dry. Now it's a bit more nebulous and everything's canon. And I just look at it differently. Do you like the story? Well, then it's canon, like for you. Like, that's good. I think that's fair. But we consider it all. People like to think that it is, they like to use the word policing a lot. I don't like to use that for this because it's a creative thing.
Yeah.
I think of it like a creative flow, and there's a Jedi Council, and it's like the way I look at directing. When I'm directing, I'm guiding the creative flow of everybody on the team, everybody on the set to try to achieve the best possible outcome for this story. If I've told the story well, if everybody knows the story, if we're all on the same page, that'll happen. And it's not about getting what I want, because what's going to happen is going to be the thing it should be, because I've guided it as a director and the team knows, and everyone has brought their particular skill and done the best they can with it and elevated it. Like, I don't imagine that what I wrote is the best thing it can be. The actor's going to add additional layers to it. Like, Rosario is amazing to me because I thought, well, how do I do this character in live action? A character that I've drawn, that I've had such an animation control of everything, how do I relinquish that to this actor? And then she did a scene and I was like, okay, so that's going to be fine.
After all that worrying,
yeah,
Rosario shows up and takes immediate ownership of the role.
I think Dave is playing a little fast and loose with canon here. I gotta say.
Oh, really? Okay.
I do.
When he talks about head canon, personal head canon.
Yeah, he's like, well, in the question of is this canon? Well, if you like the story, it's canon. Now, come on, Dave. He says, oh, it's not as simple as when George was making it, because if George did it, it was canon.
Yeah.
Well, look, no, I don't think. I mean, there are some people, Jim. We know some. Some are friends of ours that if they don't like it, they won't accept it as canon. That is true. But that's I don't think that is the average fan out there. The average fan out there understands that this is one big long saga, one big long story, and we're going to take the bitter with the sweet, and there's going to be stuff we like and things and stuff we don't like. So fan taste is not the same thing as canon. And so Dave was, again, being just a little cagey about that. No, it's canon. Book of Boba Fett is canon. Acolyte is canon, right? I mean, it's all canon.
Maybe he was talking directly to us when he was making that statement, I hope Swank really buys that, if it's canon, if you like it thing. You think he's going to buy it? He's talking to the devil and angel on his shoulder. He ain't buying it. Swank ain't buying it.
No.
But I have taken that approach personally from time to time,
You have advocated for the head canon, yeah.
As opposed to getting all angry and bent out of shape about it. I mean, there's just certain things that you can accept and other things that are easy to ignore. But when it comes to sprawling conversations like the ones we have, I think it's important to know as much as possible so you can be educated to talk about Star Wars with people. But really the only thing at the end of the day that I'm going to ever prioritize is live action, with animation a step or two right behind it.
Yeah.
But for me, it all comes down to live action.
Animation's a little slippery because you're right. You've got the Lego stuff is in there. You've got the Star Wars Visions is in there. It is not as cut and dry as you say with the live action.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I'm thinking about animation, I'm largely thinking of the major series.
Right.
Things like Bad Batch, Clone Wars, Rebels. And let's just leave it at that.
We know which one you're leaving out.
By the way, I'm surprised there hasn't been any sort of announcement revealing what the future is like for Star Wars animation. Right now, there are no series on the horizon. There's a question. Are they going to do a second season of Tales of the Jedi? Or did Tales of the Empire essentially take that slot? There's really no direction that's been publicly revealed right now for the future of Star Wars animation. I think the Visions thing is done. Bad Batch obviously is done. I would like to see them continue along with the similar vibe that they created in the Clone Wars and extend it like they did with Bad Batch. Find another story to tell in those dark times. Yeah. If you're afraid of doing the Darth Vader movie or mini-series or whatever, give us an animated series about Darth Vader out there hunting Jedi. That would be exciting. That'd be cool. And let us get in Vader's head, too. Don't make him just like Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, a mindless killing machine. Let's get into his head.
I'll tell you, the Tales of the Empire story with Barriss Offee gave me a brand new perspective on the Inquisitors, and I wouldn't mind seeing... we could have Vader obviously playing a fairly large role, but he could be... he wouldn't have to suck up all the screen time. I think having something in there to tell the story of what's going on with the Inquisitors, because it's been a mystery to me. And I think it's a cool, I always thought it was a cool concept, but the execution has been really hot cold. Sometimes it feels really good and interesting, and other times it's like, what? You're just, here's fifth sister, throw her out there, and then, she's expendable. Stooge. They're like a stooge, that's right. They're like henchmen. They're the red shirts of for Darth Vader, to use a Star Trek term. So but I think there's a lot they could do.
Of course there is. And I think they get boxed in by other things that are in development, other, potential dream productions or whatever. And they box themselves in too much, as opposed to seizing the moment and creating something that fans can rally around. Well, maybe Dave Filoni in his new executive role at Lucasfilm, which, we really haven't seen the fruits of his labor yet in that position, because it's been fairly recent within the last year when he was elevated to that position.
Right.
So naturally, we won't really see the results of that maybe for another year. So Dave Filoni and his role as steward of Star Wars, the future of Star Wars. He's sitting in the captain's seat, to take a reference from the Trek, and he talks a little bit about that.
Star Wars, as George made it in his films, it's the wonderful thing. It's the core of it. When I need to remind myself of what I'm missing, I go back and watch it. Yeah, or American Graffiti or THX, and I kind of like. Right. I refocus. This is what my task is, because you bring your own expertise and bias into it, and that's fine. And we adapt that into Star Wars now, but I think we get to better ideas that way than if it was like a yes/no province, just saying yes to that, no to that. That's not interesting. I've learned over time, even if it's something I don't like as an idea, I want to hear why someone thinks that's a good idea. And then we explore it, and sometimes it becomes a great idea. You never know.
I think Dave is one of the guys who may have put up a little bit of protest when Leslie Headland introduced the idea of the Acolyte and portraying the Jedi Knights in a less than favorable light. I think Dave may have been one of the guys who said, I don't know. I don't know if this is the right thing to do. But through persistence,
do we know that there was some pushback?
There was some pushback.
Okay.
Leslie Headland herself had mentioned that she did receive some pushback from certain creatives at Lucasfilm who felt like maybe that's not the thing we should be doing with the Jedi Knights. But she wanted to present a Star Wars story told from a certain point of view.
Now, the challenge is that we've only seen the Jedi as flawed.
That's not necessarily true because, of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda in the original trilogy presented to us like an idealized version of the Jedi. And maybe it's because they have become strongly connected to the Force through their failures.
It could be. I guess I'm thinking of the institution. The institution of the Jedi Knights. We've not seen them outside of, slipping to either sort of a less powerful force or corruption, which is really they're definitely on the fringe of corruption here when it comes to the story they're telling in the Acolyte.
Yeah. The comic book series and the novels have presented a more heroic Jedi over the years, much more so than we've ever seen in any of the films or live action. And that's the truth. And that's really reinforced a certain notion amongst fans who really prioritize those stories. And I would never fault them for prioritizing that, because I'm amongst those ranks, you know?
Yeah.
I've read a lot of those stories about the heroics of Jedi, Tales of the Jedi, KOTOR, all of that stuff. We've been eating that stuff up for decades. So if you look, and I know I said before that I prioritize the live action, and I do. But there is still that undeniable element of all of those other stories that have portrayed the Jedi is actually very heroic and flawless and powerful and, you know, all of the above. So it's hard to make that separation because it's all coming from the Star Wars brand. So it's an uphill climb to do anything that presents some of these things that are so baked in to fandom at this point. It's almost immovable. I think there's a certain set of balls that someone like, you know, Leslie or the Acolyte crew have to actually try to subvert the system. Rian Johnson tried, I guess. But, you know, it just doesn't go well. It needs a stronger foundation than just flipping a switch and saying, oh, this is how it is now.
I just feel that subversion of all this stuff is just way too easy now. It's not special. It's not unique. I don't think it's brave.
No.
I think these days, it would be more brave to say, no, wait a minute, the Jedi Knights are the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, and that's what they're going to be. It's one of the challenges they have, frankly, when they make Superman stories, is because Superman is too true blue. Maybe that's where the expression comes from. But, you know, Superman, Captain America even. Oh, you know, he's too patriotic. Yeah, that's the character.
Yeah.
You know what? Jedi are too heroic, you're going to tell me? They all have to be flawed. Mm-hmm. They all have to be dealing with their inner demons. They all have to be on the verge of corruption.
Well, I do like the fragility of being a Jedi getting explored. I do enjoy that. And I think that's what George was doing with the prequels, was revealing how fragile these guys are because they're walking such a tightrope at all times. It's the whole with great power comes great responsibility. I get it. But human nature is something where you're always being pulled,
Sure. I agree with you. I like making them human. They're relatable that way.
Right.
But I think the challenge that I'm having, and I've said this before, is that all of the institutions in Star Wars are proving to be corrupt. So is Star Wars saying that organized anything is corrupt? Organized Jedi corrupt? Organized the New Republic, the Old Republic, the Senate, the Sith, obviously. But all of the institutions are corrupt. I'd actually go so far because it's really odd because I'm doing this rewatch of Andor with my wife who's not seen the show, and so we've been binging Andor. She's way
Does she
into
like
Andor.
it?
Loves it,
And what does she think of Acolyte?
Lukewarm, but invested. Like definitely gonna see it to the end. But what's really interesting is that we'll watch an episode of The Acolyte, and then we'll watch an episode of Andor. Now that is like, you know, going into the ice water, into the hot springs. But in thinking about these institutions, I look at a guy like Luthen, who is really becoming one of my favorite Star Wars characters of all time. I think he might be in my top 10 characters of all time.
Wow.
And despite the fact that he owns who he is. He doesn't make any apologies for it. He knows what he's fighting for. And yes, he'll bend the rules and he'll do some terrible things, but he's honest. I feel. I think he's one of the most honest Star Wars characters there is. And so I look at that rebellion as being maybe one of the most truly heroic institutions in Star Wars. Maybe the rebellion is really sort of the apex of heroics.
Fight the system, fight the power.
Right.
You know?
Right.
That's what, I mean, that to me is what the rebellion is all about. And that to me is what Luthen Rael is all about. Fight the power.
Right.
And, you know, like I said, with Star Wars, you know, things like Andor, Ahsoka, the Acolyte, the Mandalorian, the live action stuff is really the priority stuff. But for so many years, our only way to access fresh Star Wars storytelling in a visual format was via the Clone Wars. That was the only thing keeping Star Wars alive as far as broadcast or whatever, you know. And that's how we got to know Dave Filoni, the man, the filmmaker, the Star Wars fan. And he discusses a little bit here about what it was like and how it all went down as he evolved from a guy largely associated with animation into a guy who is now associated with live action.
Well, you want to keep evolving creatively, I think. You know, you don't want to just get so comfortable. It's something I've taught myself. When I get comfortable, I don't think I'm being as creative as I can be anymore. It tends to take everything down and you become satisfied, and that's no good. So, you know, I was a 2D animator that got put on running a 3D or a computer animated show. I'd never done computers. I never had an email at work before I came to Lucasfilm. If you can imagine, it was 2005. And that was very uncomfortable. We weren't going to do storyboards. We were going to do everything in a computer. No hand-drawn stuff anymore. But then I think I learned to do some of the best work that I'd done working with that team. And so, you know, knowing John was a massive benefit, hearing his story, knowing he wanted to introduce Baby Yoda to the world, I thought, oh boy, that could go terribly wrong. So, you know, it seems like a home run now, but we were both, you know, concerned because we're messing with Yoda.
Yeah, I that was a gamble. That was a gamble. It paid off beautifully, fantastically. Is still paying off. But certainly don't blame Dave. He's absolutely right for thinking that it could have gone terribly wrong. But they did it with a lot of sincerity and a lot of homage to what made Yoda interesting, the original character, obviously, of Yoda. And my only beef in the whole thing is they really didn't want to go with the Baby Yoda name. They really fought against the Baby Yoda name.
Well, I mean, but really, I mean, in universe, it doesn't work.
Well,
it's not Baby Yoda, but I mean, it's just that's just how we embrace the character, because we weren't going to call him the child.
Yes,
as the corporation demanded us to call him. No, F you, he's Baby Yoda. So, but I get it. I think Favreau was a little put off by the Baby Yoda thing because he's the guy crafting the story. And I think he fears people are going to be confused and think that actually is an infant Frank Oz Yoda.
Yes, yes. And I get that. The timeline's all over the place with these shows.
Yeah, right.
And,
it's hard to follow.
Yeah, yeah. So, I can get that. Sure.
Bring me my bottle, you will. Okay, that's Baby Yoda. And Baby Yoda never has a bottle. So
my diaper, you will change. Yes.
Yes.
You got to get the Tom Kane yes in there.
You got the Yoda. You got the Yoda voice. I think I've aged out of Yoda at this point.
Oh, no.
It's like, I've put my vocal cords through so much stress and strain over the years that I'm losing my grasp on Yoda. I have to do the Yoda warm-up, of course.
Sure.
Yes. Feel the force around you. Yeah. Now, see, I was able to do it when I was your age, so back in my youth.
I'm going to take advantage of these years, my Yoda years.
Yeah, you better, because the quality of your Yoda impersonations will decrease over time. Even ask Frank Oz, and he will agree with you.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Okay. All right. From Yoda to Filoni. Here we go.
Yeah.
Dave does talk about some of his more current projects, most notably Ahsoka, which Dave is now very attached to. You know, you can't think of Ahsoka without thinking of Dave Filoni. And he talks about how it all sort of went down, how Ahsoka got brought into live action and the challenges that presented.
I told John, I said, I want to bring Ahsoka into this. And here's the outline. Yeah, and John is so generous. I have to tell you, like, I pitched to John, I'm going to write this story, and I think that Ahsoka is the character that could talk to Grogu, and that's how we get his name, because she could divine it by speaking with him through the Force. And John's like, great, that sounds great. Go for it, do it. So I just wrote it, you know, and I showed it to him, and he'd give me some thoughts. But that episode in the second season, episode 5, when Ahsoka appears, I just said, I'm just going all the way. I'm going to make this the Samurai Kurosawa-esque. When I wanted to see Star Wars as a kid, this is what I dreamed it would be. I'm not going to wait. It's going to be like right in the beginning of the episode. Just get right into it like George would want, and just let Rosario do her thing.
Yeah. So it does sound like, I mean, obviously Favreau was very open to it, but Dave had to pitch John on this.
Yes. But that's a big thing, you know, to say, hey, I'm going to bring my character in so she can facilitate the revelation of your character's name.
Right.
That's walking on a tightrope a little bit. Even no matter how close John and Dave might be professionally, that's a difficult tightrope to walk, because you never know. Favreau might have had a whole different idea in his head about how the name reveal would go down. But Filoni brings in this classic Star Wars character from the animation era, one that he, together with George Lucas, created. Right. It's almost the perfect vessel.
Yeah.
It's really, you know,
it almost had to be her,
probably,
right? It had to be her.
Favreau probably considers that to be a blessing. If anybody would ever ask him, what were you thinking about Grogu and the name reveal, and when Filoni pitched Ahsoka being the way that could come to light? I mean, that's just falling in his lap, you know? That's solid gold.
Right.
That just fell right into Favreau's lap. I'm very curious. I would love to know if John had an alternate story about how the name would get revealed and things like that. But when Filoni presents Ahsoka as the one who can kind of read his mind and apply the identity to him, that's irresistible. You can't not go in that direction, I think. So maybe John didn't really have a solid direction into which he was heading in. So to get more deep into Ahsoka, you know, we've talked a little bit about, you know, Ahsoka having a kind of a bug up her butt at the beginning of the series. She wasn't resembling any of the charisma or upbeat personality of the character that we've always known, the way Ashley Eckstein always presented the character. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, you know, she's older now and stuff. But it's like Ahsoka was almost an entirely different character at the beginning of the Ahsoka series. And so Filoni talks about what it was like to actually present via live action a less than perfect Ahsoka Tano. Here's what he had to say.
You know, Ahsoka's balance in the Force is really that she doesn't like to claim the title Jedi. Jedi to her means very specific things. It means she was part of an order, part of an organization. The Force exists, of course, outside of the Jedi. The Jedi just learned to wield it. But, you know, she has a kind of checkered past with them, which is, I think, what makes her hesitant. And she tries to be a good person. But I think she's also challenged because most of her life she's been a warrior. She's been a person that goes in and dispenses justice by cutting you down. She's fought. And she struggles with that. And that's, you know, definitely one of her characters, you know, later in life struggles. If she's too good all the time, also, it's not very interesting. If she's always going to make the right decision, it's not very interesting. And a lot of what I loved about Star Wars growing up was, if you think about this, obviously thought about it a lot. When you hit Return of the Jedi, Luke's never done anything really dark in the previous films that makes me think, oh, maybe he'll be a bad guy. But boy, am I worried about it in the last movie. I am so worried that he's going to give in to what the Emperor wants. I am so worried that he's right on that precipice. And I think he's been pretty great. He's helped his friends. He's blown up the Death Star. He's desperately tried to save Han. He's lost his hand fighting with his father. Like, all this stuff is going to... He seems pretty good. But no, he's right on the brink of making a terrible decision. And yet he he lets that anger go because he loves his father. He puts that ahead of everything else. He's willing to die. And so, I think those are the core things I love about Star Wars, that feeling it gives you that, okay, I can overcome that darkness too. I can overcome that wickedness. And that's really us, in the dark side, seizing it for our own agency.
Okay.
Yeah. So his answer to the question about starting Ahsoka in this much more kind of stiff, stoic place seems to be to give her somewhere to go. That seems to be what he's striving for, because without that, he thinks it's not very interesting if she stays, the same. And you could argue and pick nits. I mean, I think that maybe they went a little too far. I thought she was a little too boring at first. Really, that was the crime of it. It wasn't that she was, she wasn't anything. She was just bland, tasteless.
Right. And also, we never saw her. Like, maybe it would have been more compelling at the beginning of the series if she was having a real struggle with the dark side. It's never implicitly stated in the show. I mean, she's just kind of a mope.
Yeah.
And, people are trying to shake her out of it. And you think she's being mopey because she's been reunited with Sabine and there's friction between the two of them, and we're not really sure what that friction is because it was never part of any Star Wars story prior to this.
Mm-mm.
I would have much rather have seen an Ahsoka who maybe the show opens and she decapitates a family of 4, and she's real dark side stuff, or she comes close to hurting someone. I'd hate to bring it up, but kind of like Luke in those flashbacks in The Last Jedi.
Okay.
Where he pulled out the saber and he's like, I'm sensing dark side off of this guy. He's sleeping. I'm just going to put it to end right now. It's the old question. If you knew what Hitler was going to grow up to be while he was still a baby, would you let him live? I mean,
Killing
those type
baby
of things.
Hitler, yeah.
I mean, it's a hideous topic to bring up, but it is a topic that Rian Johnson has explored a little bit. Watch the movie Looper. And that is basically the gist of the story without being so specific about Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
It's all fiction, and they bring in fictional characters to sort of fit these archetypes. But the whole story is about going back in time and killing this horrible killer and whether or not you can do it while he's still a child. And yeah. So that's interesting stuff. And that's something that I saw Rian Johnson repeating in The Last Jedi with those Luke Skywalker flashbacks, where you just get caught in the moment, And Luke's like, well, I can clean this all up right now.
Yeah.
But also Luke is relying on his personal connection to the Force and the visions he's receiving. Now, again, I don't think there's a single Jedi who believes that the vision he receives about the future is actually still set in stone. Because Yoda says himself, always in motion, the future is. It's hard to predict. I think Luke, suddenly then he came short of killing Kylo in his sleep. And he didn't pull the trigger on that one. which would have been terrible for his character, because we know Luke is a very compassionate character who believes in family ties and the strength of that relationship. So for him to kill Kylo in his sleep, that would have been terrible. But it was Kylo woke up and jumped to conclusions.
Can we all agree that Kylo might have overreacted a little bit?
Well, when you okay,
all right, your uncle has a lightsaber drawn over your bed.
The best parts of this story were not revealed in the film.
Yeah.
It would have been so interesting to see a Jedi Master Luke at the Academy with a Kylo Ren Padawan and them actually having friction with each other. Actually discovering that there is something that's fueling their relationship toward the negative side. And what pushes Luke to stand there with the saber drawn over the bed? We don't know. We only just know through exposition, and there's no substance behind it.
No.
We can apply the substance. I've applied the substance. Somebody's going to take that and they're going to edit it out of context and about me applying the substance. Somebody's going to do that. They're going to come up with something very dirty and nasty. And if you do it, you're banned. I don't know who I'm going to ban from what. I can't ban people from a podcast. What am I thinking? But again, to reel myself back in, these are the elements from, I think that hurt the sequel trilogy was like, there's great storytelling going on there, but we never got to see it. So
all the good stuff is happening off screen.
Yeah, what's that all about?
Yeah.
If you got a great story, tell a great story. Don't play these games with us. Don't Rashomon me anymore. Okay? I'm sick of being Rashomon. Who cares?
I don't even know what that is. I've heard everybody talking about it with the Acolyte.
It's a Kurosawa film. It's a Kurosawa film. And it was something that was a heavy influence on the Rian Johnson film, and it's been something that will eventually be a heavy influence on The Acolyte. Why in the world would somebody take something that fueled The Last Jedi and then apply it to a new Star Wars thing? Don't you see the minefield in front of you? I'm drifting into Eastside Dave territory. I cannot let that happen. I have to have a voice.
Let's shift gears and talk about the future of Star Wars on the big screen. We've heard from Dave Filoni talking about the small screen. Let's start with Shawn Levy. What's going on with that movie?
All right, yes. So a couple of years ago, Shawn revealed that he's working on a Star Wars film. I don't think Lucasfilm has actually ever made any sort of announcements, either formal or casual, regarding Shawn Levy and his connection to the franchise. But Shawn is definitely working on something for Star Wars, but he's also working on about 700 other projects right now. So he appeared on Deadline's show called Behind the Lens, hosted by Pete Hammond. And the question came up about his Star Wars movie. Is it still on? Is he still making it?
I am still developing my Star Wars movie, and I would love to make it someday. I have an idea that I'm excited about, and development is slow going, and developing something with that amount of mythology scaffolding.
Right.
It takes time. Yeah. You got to be aware of, okay, well, wait, what are they doing over here? What's that group doing over here? Right, because they have television, they have films. But some really exciting conversations with Kathy and Dave Filoni and the group over at Lucas. And I don't know, man. I'm trying to preserve some dreams. And that's definitely one of them that's out there in my future. And I hope to not rest till I get there.
Yeah, this is not an example of that, but we're going to talk about the Daisy Ridley film. These projects, I don't know why, when they know, I know this in the industry that I'm in, that the creative development process for these types of projects, whether it be Broadway musicals or feature films, can take years. Sometimes it can take a decade for these things to happen. I just don't understand the rush to announce. I don't get it.
Well, it was Shawn. It was Shawn who revealed.
No, I know. In this case, it was Shawn. But like with the Daisy Ridley thing and the Mangold and what's the other movie we're waiting? Well, we know we'll get the Favreau movie. The Filoni movie seems so premature. I don't know if that was just to stroke Dave or what that was, but that announcement seemed very premature because we got to get through multiple seasons of shows before we can even get and land to that point.
I would be surprised if we see the Dave Filoni film before 2030. Okay, I don't think we're going to see that for a while. And the Shawn Levy film, of course, it was Shawn who made it public.
Yes, right.
That he was going to be making a Star Wars film, and he said he had met with Kathleen Kennedy, and she wanted him to make a film that has the trademarks of the other films that he's created. It has to have like a lot of heart and humor and wish fulfillment, you know. But we still don't know what to expect from this film. And Jeff Snyder, the entertainment reporter, has revealed that Shawn Levy's film could be a movie that tells a story about Rey. And that gets confusing because we know that the Charmin Obaid-Chinoy film is supposed to be about Rey. So who's making this Rey movie? I believe that there has been a bumpy road as far as developing the Obaid-Chinoy / Stephen Knight film. And this film project is something separate from that, but it could also be something that replaces that film that Obaid-Chinoy and Stephen Knight have been working on. It could be slotted in there, and they could just bring in Shawn Levy and whatever concept he has.
You think Shawn Levy is a contingency plan for the Obaid-Chinoy?
I think he's part. Yes, I think he's part of that. I think he's part of that. And also, it's a situation where what if the Rey film is released by Obaid-Chinoy and Stephen Knight, and it's a massive flop, you know. But it is worth noting that the Rey film from Obaid-Chinoy is still in its very earliest stages of development. And this is like years after it was announced last year. But we had known that they've been working on this since about 2021. And it's run into some developmental issues. And these things happen. But I'm very convinced that when they announced it at Star Wars Celebration, it was scheduled to be the next Star Wars film. And then they went through all of 2023 running into issues with the development. At the end of 2023, when they realized, hey, there's no way we're going to get this Rey film done on time. What can we possibly put in there? Let's give Favreau the keys to the Star Wars cinematic universe and let him make a Mando movie. It's a no-brainer.
Sure.
The foundation is already there.
He's got the story ready.
But I believe they were fully convinced that the next Star Wars film was going to be the Rey Skywalker film. And development's been going on for that film for a long time. And I think it was going to be coming out in either May or December 2026. But the bottom is dropped out of that. And we don't really know much about what's happening with the Rey film. Daisy Ridley appeared on the Smartless podcast, which is hosted by Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes. Or is it Haynes?
Hayes.
Hayes, all right. It is. And she was talking about other things, but they picked away at her a little bit because I think Sean Hayes.
Sean's a big Star Wars fan, yeah.
He's a hardcore Star Wars fan from what I gathered from this. He's not the most informed, though, which leads me to believe that he needs to start subscribing to Rebel Force Radio and get on that horse. But he's the one who really generates a lot of pressure on Daisy to talk. And she talks a little bit about the breakfast meeting she went to with Kathy Kennedy, and she thought it was just breakfast, but Kennedy then said, hey, let's do a Rey film, and they made the announcement at Star Wars Celebration last year. We've heard those stories before. What I want is updates on the status of the Rey Skywalker film, and I want them. I want them now. And Daisy pretty much says the same old stuff she's been saying.
It's very cool. Different writer, different director. It will be quite a different feeling, I imagine.
Who's writing?
But
Who's directing?
Yeah, who's writing?
Do we know?
Who's directing?
Stephen Knight is writing.
Oh, nice.
And directing is Charmin Oboy-Chinoy, who has made some unbelievable documentaries. And it's very exciting, and I shall be reading a script soonish. And I think we might film next year.
We might film next year.
And she still hasn't even seen a flipping script.
Yeah.
She still hasn't seen a script. What the hell is going on? What the hell is going on? So, will she ever
development hell? That's what's going on. That's
development
going on.
hell, and that seems to be something swirling around a lot of Star Wars projects. Development hell. Maybe if you want to get your projects out of development hell, quit having Satan develop them. Thanks for laughing.
Is that Eastside Dave?
I know. Maybe I'm tapping into my my internal East Side, but I'm glad you laughed because I don't really want that to be taken all that seriously. Just doing a little venting right now.
All right. Well,
but that's our updates. You know, she still hasn't read a script, and like I said, when they made the announcement in London last April that this was a film on the horizon, I think they were fully confident that it was going to be in front of cameras by summer 2024. This summer, right now. And the only thing in front of the camera is this little guy right here, my pal Grogu. He's the only one. He's the only one who's ready for the silver screen.
Look at him.
He's ready to go.
He's
Look,
ready for that close-up. He's holding his own Pez dispenser. It's so meta. Whoa, look at that.
Chewie, get us out of here!
It's almost to scale. That's amazing. All right. Wow, a lot of fun this week. A lot of news. I think this is like hurry up and wait. That seems to be where we're at with Star Wars on the big screen. Hurry up and wait. We don't have to wait for the next episode of The Acolyte or the Rebel Force Radio After Show. That is next week, Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. I saw someone on the chat say, I thought it was 8 o'clock Central Time. No, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, 7 o'clock Central. Yeah, so make sure that you're there for that. We won't have a regular Rebel Force Radio weekly podcast next week. But you can always find more Rebel Force Radio over on Patreon. Patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio. Your place to get more RFR. You get the full show video if you're at the All Access member tier or above. You also get commercial-free Rebel Force Radio audio. I believe Mac puts a little extra special sauce in the mix. I think it's a full stereo mix that you get over there on Patreon. And podcasts, of course, that you can't find anywhere else. You're not going to go on Spotify and be able to subscribe to RFR Q&A or the Babu Freeze or RPG, things like that. You can only get that through Patreon. And if you've been watching our after shows, you know that a lot of the callers, some nights all the callers, are Rebel Force Radio Patreon supporters, and that's the level of conversation and discourse that you're going to have if you are hanging out with that community. It is a great community, so check it out. Speaking of the after shows, we broadcast those exclusively on YouTube, but we do have a YouTube channel. We've got archives that go back a long time. Great interviews, classic bits from previous episodes of Rebel Force Radio. So if you're new, it's a really great place to go and kind of maybe find where some of those inside jokes and things came from that you hear recurring here on Rebel Force Radio, but also great interviews with Star Wars celebrities over the years. A lot of good stuff happening over on YouTube. You can also follow us on all of our social platforms. We're on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, so please like us and follow us over there. We also give you updates for and reminders when we're about to record a live show or something like that. So that's a great place to go. The official website for all things and everything Rebel Force Radio is rebelforceradio.com. But above all, the best way to support us is just to do what you're doing right now. Keep listening. I don't care whether you're mowing the grass, whether you're on your commute, taking a bike ride, doesn't matter. You got RFR in your ear holes, and we appreciate that. And if you've got a Star Wars fan in your life that has not been turned on to Rebel Force Radio, do so. Tell them about it. Say, I listened to this podcast. It's great. Great way to keep up with the latest news, the latest things happening in Star Wars. And I'll tell you the one thing you can rely on us. There's no clickbait. There's no sensationalism going on with Rebel Force Radio. We're not trying to get, we're not trying to get as many views as possible. Of course, we want to grow the audience. We wouldn't grow the audience the way we've grown it for the last practically 20 years doing these podcasts, just by doing quality analysis and having a lot of fun with the thing that we all love, which is Star Wars. We don't take it too seriously, but we take it seriously enough. So if you can, please subscribe to Rebel Force Radio on your podcatcher of choice. And if it allows you to do so, we'd love to have a review. Love reviews. We read them all. Just one simple rule, please.
Make them good.
That's going to do it for us this week. We'll see you next week with the Acolyte After Show next Wednesday. So until next time, for Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
And I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
the Force will be with you, always.
If you only knew the power of one, the power of two, the power of many.